Welcome to episode 9 of the DWRDNET Stationery feed. My guest today is Erick Gama of Amarillo Stationery. Erick, welcome. Just to get us started, introduce yourself and kind of give us a brief overview of who you are and what you do.
For sure. Hey, first of all, thank you, Derek, for having me on. Like you said, my name is Erick Gama. I am your very friendly, yellow loving pen enthusiast. I have been in the hobby for maybe 4 or 5 years now, and loving it.
No, that's great. So to start off, I've been asking all the different guests just some basic questions about general stationery items. So let's get started by, what do you currently have inked? What are you writing with right now?
You know what? Luckily, I brought along with me this very special pen that actually Nick showed on your channel a few weeks ago, I believe, or a few days ago. But he made this pen inspired by the colors of my logo. We will talk about that later. But I asked him to do a few more to make a few more pens, and he made some, and then I kept one. And so this is currently inked up with one of my favorite inks by Monarca Stationery. It's called Tierra Colorada, which is a pretty brown color. So yeah, that's what I currently have. I have a ton more pens. I think about 16 pens right now that I do not have in front of me, but I am playing with them.
No, I think I did a count the other day. Someone was asking. I think I have like 25 pens inked right now or something, but been doing my best part to work through them. But
That's a
so
healthy amount.
yeah, well, you got to have colors and the nibs and varieties. And any new pen, of course, you want to use it because it's new.
Right.
So it's, if you're in this hobby, even for a little bit, you always say, "Oh, I only need one pen," and that quickly devolves into multiple cases full of pens, as we all know. So.
Well, of course, yeah, we know that.
So, next question. If you had no budget, what is your Grail pen? Like, if someone would just hand you any pen ever, what would it be?
There are a lot that come to mind, Derek, but I think the very first one that I fell in love with is the Montegrappa Venus de Milo, which is a beautiful, beautiful pen. And sorry, I didn't bring a picture with me, but hopefully we can provide a link to that. But it's got this beautiful sculpted body of like the Venus de Milo statue. And it's just, from when I first saw it, I was like, this is perfection. This is one of the most beautiful pens I've ever seen. So if I had no budget, that would be my pen.
When with Monte Grappa, that's one of those things where the no budget would really help because they make some cool looking pens, but they're very
Yeah,
proud
they
of their
do.
pens.
Of course,
And
yeah, as they should
and
be. Yeah.
well, yeah. And then recently, it was announced that they're going to stop selling to retailers and open up boutiques
Oh,
in the U.S. I heard that on Anna from Well Appointed Desk Patron
okay.
podcast. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah.
Having Mont Blanc and Monte Grappa stores in theory. So,
But I'm
so
sure it will go well for them.
well, yeah, it's. I'll just be interested to see if they have enough name recognition for people who aren't in the stationery hobby to do the walk in and purchase a premium. Because if you're in the hobby, you
Yeah.
understand price on some things, but someone casually walking through might not really. They might
Yeah.
have a little bit of sticker shock.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and I'm going to ask this as a two-part question because you sell inks. So, what are
Hmm.
your general ink preferences that are not your inks first? And then, of your inks, what's your preference? So, we'll do that as a two-part.
Okay. For inks that I don't sell that are my preference, I like colors that shade. I like interesting colors. I like colorful colors as well. So I'm not, although I have a few blacks and blues, I don't usually tend to gravitate towards those colors unless they have interesting properties. As like the Sailor Haha that has, it's like a bluish ink with beautiful shading. And I tend to stick to non-shimmer inks just because I don't like the hassle of having to clean it out. And it's happened to me that if I have something with shimmer inked up, I kind of forget about it. And then here I come back like 3 months later, I'm like, oh God, now I have to like really clean this pen. So I really enjoy those. Right now, I'm actually really enjoying a lot of the Birmingham Pen Company inks just because they are coming out with a bunch of cool colors. And I'm also in love with their labels that they're doing. I don't know if you remember some of them, but they have like really unique graphic labels. So I gravitate towards those bottles, even though I may just be collecting them for the bottle and the label. But that's what
No, I
I'm
have
like.
the older Birmingham Pen Company labels. I don't have any of the new ones yet, but I know what you're talking about because,
Yeah.
you know, it does have a look. It's kind of like the Ackerman bottles or the
Mhm.
Roshizuku. The bottle itself is almost worth getting, even if you don't like the ink, because you could pour the ink out or use it
Yeah.
up or give out samples to all your friends and then refill the bottle up with something you prefer. You know?
Right. Yeah. That's another thought. I hadn't thought about that actually. And as for my shop, not I didn't think about this one well enough. Like, but I think that w- the one of the colors that I'm really enjoying, actually, it's an ink that I just came out with this year, is one of my proprietary inks. It's called Blue Suntan, which is inspired by my mascot's blue color, and it's just got a beautiful shading as well. It's an interesting blue, and it's got a like a dark kind of black shading. So it's an interesting color. And if people want to try it out, check out like swatches because it's really cool.
No, and the reason why I asked that is we're recording this and it'll be a couple weeks before it's released. But on Brad's Pen Addict Twitch stream today, someone was asking about yellow, and like the chat just went crazy talking about where's is Eric on here because the yellow ink he sells is like
Oh,
becoming one of the quintessential yellows. I don't remember the name, and I would probably pronounce it wrong, but your yellow ink that you sell was highly
there.
recommended in that thread.
That's awesome. And I was in that chat for like a hot second, just quickly enough to enter the giveaway and then like leave. But I wonder which one they were talking about. I'll have to check it out. There are two yellows that I have. The very first one that I came out with is called Amarillo Antiguo, and which
I
is a
think it was that
very
one. That one
okay.
that sounds familiar.
That's a very true yellow color. The one that I just came out with this year is called Toasty Joggers, and it's more of a brown leaning yellow.
Yeah, it
Uh,
wasn't toasty. It wasn't one of the four new ones. It was the
okay,
original one. So
okay,
that
gotcha.
because they Brad pulled up your website and the picture that had the pen on top, and someone wanted a good yellow ink that you could see when you're writing, but it wasn't so light until it dried. Because that's a common thing. Like if you've ever
Yes.
used the Platinum Citrus Black, it's a great
Oh yeah,
ink when it dries, but when you're writing with it, you can't see what you're
you can
writing,
see
so
it.
it's hard to use it. So
Yeah.
moving on from inks, what about papers? What are the kind of papers you like? Is there a certain brand or a certain style or papers that you hate? Talk about what you like or don't like for papers.
Oh, paper. The paper dilemma this year is kind of intense. But when I first started, I of course started with Tomoe River. That's what, any pen enthusiast is going to start with, probably. And then I quickly discovered Cosmo Airlight, and I fell in love with that paper. It was just so bright and crisp, and the line actually became a little bit wider or bigger on the paper, and it just showed the ink really really well. So I really fell in love with it. It was nice and cushiony, but then like what a few months ago they discontinued it, so now I have to like again like try to find something else. But a brand that I really enjoy is Maruman. They have some really awesome notebooks for a very low cost with very great paper. And I think it's the spiral line, which is usually, I think they have a craft cover for the notebooks. So that's one paper I've been enjoying. And then just a few days ago, I discovered that the Traveler's Notebook paper is actually really, really good. Of course, like I think a lot of people know that, but because I don't use the Traveler's Notebooks a lot, I have the covers, but I use other inserts. I didn't realize that until just a few days ago. So I
Yeah,
think
my
I'm gonna be,
wife really
yeah.
loves the Travelers inserts. She just got her third Travelers, the red Love and Trip,
Oh yeah,
and
that's really good.
she has them for different use cases, but she loves those. And then Tomoe, the Lockbee system, which if you like the size, they have A5, and they just released a Traveler size, and it has the 68-gram Tomoe, which is great. Because that's getting harder to come by, and it seems
Yeah.
to be very consistent. But Maruman is definitely becoming that. There's a video idea that I want to make of how would you pen able somebody and like some starter sets. And one of the things is like the Maramon paper, because cost to performance ratio, it's a great entry for someone to get, enjoy writing with a fountain pen. And then if they truly love it, they're going to dive in like the rest of us and go down the rabbit hole of paper choices. But yeah, the Cosmo Airlight is another one, because bank paper is one that I really like. And with that now being, to supply on hand, I just went through and did the Yamamoto paper samplers.
Okay.
So there's some equivalents there, but paper is a never ending thing, because I got burned by Hobonichi this year, my first time
Yeah.
ever getting one. So I'm in that, planning
Exactly.
for the future.
Best of
So
luck.
yeah. And then my final kind of opening question, my favorite one to ask, and this is one you actually, because I give questions to guests in advance just as a heads up, so we're not catching anybody blind. But your favorite stationary adjacent item, and let's make sure the technology works here so you can explain. Yeah, there we go.
Yes. I chose my desk. And I was actually running around the house earlier today, like, what is my favorite stationary adjacent item? I had a few other things in mind, but I think my desk is really my favorite. It's just it's not even a corner, but it's a wall in my house, in my living room, that I have just made my own. I painted the wall black. I added some cool art. Like right on the top, you can see my if you're watching the video, you can see the Jose Naranja's poster that he sells that are also available in my shop. So it's up there hanging, decorating my wall. I have some stationery on the left side, some notebooks, pencils, lots of field notes. And then I have my vinyl player. So when I'm sitting there just copying a book, copying text, I just put on a vinyl and listen to music with my dogs lounging with me. So I would think that's probably my very favorite stationary adjacent item
No,
or
and
spot in house.
I think that's one of my favorite answers so far, because it's hard to narrow down to one, and it's kind of an open-ended question. So you took it in a direction that I really appreciate. Of it's this area you have your
Yes.
own, because like my wife has when she's writing, she has a writer's nook in our like finished attic area, and she has a desk there that's not her work desk,
Mm-hmm.
so that when she wants to write, she's not sitting down where she's spending the day, doing work. It's a completely different ambiance and setup. So that's really appreciated, because not everybody is able to have that kind of space, and it's nice when you are able to.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So let's get down to the important part. Amarillo Stationery, which I did make sure I was pronouncing that as close as I can without the with my accent. Um, just to start out, kind of walk through the history of how and when you decided to start up this really popular small stationery business.
Yeah. So when I first started in the fountain pen community, I think a year after, my friend and I decided to start a podcast in Spanish about fountain pens. And we did that for, I think, 2 years together. And through that podcast, we interviewed a lot of brands from Latin America, mainly Mexico. And through that time, I was wondering why they didn't have a bigger representation in the US. And I was like, well, maybe that's my purpose in this little community, just be that shop that has all of these brands and offers them in the US. And so it started very quickly. I think I registered the business. And then after that, I was like, okay, well, now I have to have a name. So, like, my business name is EG Stationery, my initials. But then I was like, okay, well, now I need something better than that. And I went through a few rounds of names. Some of them were like a mashup of Spanish and English. And then in the end, I had narrowed it down to Amarillo Mostaza, which means mustard yellow in Spanish. But I was like, okay, that's gonna be like people are not gonna know what that's about, and it may be a little bit difficult for people to pronounce. So I just took off the mostaza and put stationery, Amarillo Stationery, and Amarillo is yellow in Spanish, and that's my favorite color. That's why I chose that. And yeah, we're here. What I think I just celebrated 3 years, 22, 23, 24, 20. Yeah, of being in business.
No, that's very cool. And that's one thing that I think for a small business, especially in stationery, you're doing something different. So that makes you
Mhm.
stand out.
Yes.
Pin shows are great, but there's a lot of tables. You're going from table to table, and it's the same stuff. And it's the tables that I like going to that have the different stuff. It's
Hmm.
not the items I see everywhere. I want to see the unique things
Yeah,
that stand out. So, you started Amarillo, and just for a note for any Texans, it's not Amarillo, and I made sure to ask Eric that before starting to talk, because when I first saw this, I assumed, oh, there's a stationery store in the north part of Texas,
yeah.
until I learned more. So just wanted to add that caveat, because anybody who grew up there, oh, it's Amarillo. So, but I wanted to swing back. You started the business, but then your mascot is probably one of the most recognizable because of the bright yellow. And I have, once again, I'll bring up your first mascot and then start with that, and then we'll move on to your current one.
For sure. And yeah, just really quickly to that note of Amarillo, like you're not the only one. You're not the first one. And people, I'm probably going to still hear that, hey, are you from Texas? Like, no, I'm not. I'm from Chicago. So I need to make a sticker of that for sure. But yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, like the shop really just started really quickly. And then I was like, okay, well, I have a name. Now I need a logo. I need a brand. So I hit up one of my friends who worked something out for me really quickly, and within a week he had, like, actually within days he had something for me. I did request a fountain pen and also a globe as part of the logo, but then it wasn't until like maybe a months later when I was like, "Hey, can we have a character of the globe?" And this is what he came up with, which was super cute. He actually put back in the day I have him right here. I had red glasses. So he took those red glasses and put them on the globe and gave him hands and eyes and put a little pen on him. So that's how my little character came about, Mr. Amarillo. And when I was wanting to do more with the shop and the brand, I wanted to do merch. And so I was like, I need something, not that this was bad, but I just needed something that was more developed, more graphic. And so I hit up a graphic design team in Mexico who did a rebrand of my identity, and they came up with what is now my logo, the one that you probably see everywhere. And they provided 4 different options of my identity, and all of them had the same character. But just different colors. But this is the one we landed on because I think that really reflects Amarillo.
Yeah, and give me a second here. We were fighting a little bit of technology. It's not wanting to show the new one, but and go ahead and fix
No
it real
problem.
quick here, because that's one thing. When I first, Nick Pasquale is local to me, and whenever we have a kind of a weekly coffee meetup, he has his rickshaw with that
Yeah.
bright yellow, and it jumps out, and the logo is just so recognizable that it's like, oh, I want one of those. Because even when I was talking to Eric to schedule this, I was like, hey, when you get more of those 2 and 3 pin ones back in, because they're so, it's just a unique color. It stands out in your bag, and it's just a cool little mascot. It reminds me, if you ever watched any of the Marvel shows, um, Loki, the
Okay.
the TVA mascot, Miss, I can't remember the name, but it's kind of a 50s ish era, kind of retro
Yeah.
drawing, which, you know,
I have some people come up to me and say that it reminds me of Pac-Man, and also there's this other character, I think it's called Cuphead or something, Mr. Cuphead, something like that. So it's got that kind of vibe. And it's like you mentioned at pen shows, like it's once somebody buys like one of the bags or the pouches, more people come to my table like, hey, I'm seeing everybody or people walk around with this and it's so cute. How much is it and can I buy one? So yeah, it just kind of
yeah.
sells itself.
And I'm actually going to skip around questions because I have a question related to that.
Yeah,
So
for
your
sure.
rickshaw collaboration bags, they always stand out, like we are just talking about. But talk a little bit more of how cool that is to see people. You show up at the pin show, and they might never have met you, seen you, but they're walking around with that bright yellow rickshaw bag. Like seeing your brand so prevalent, like on Instagram or at pin shows or just pictures people post. How cool is that?
It
Where
is.
they're doing free marketing for you, walking around with their pins, and you're like, because it's the thing, people are going to ask, where'd you get that bag? It's just
Mhm.
unique enough where it's like people they want one, even if they're just going to get a 2-pin cozy. They're like,
Yeah.
I need one of those. And then once they get
Yeah.
one, it's probably like, oh, I really like that one. It stands out so much. It's so different. I need more.
Yeah, no, it's honestly the best. And seeing pictures on Instagram makes me smile all the time, and every time I see one. But yeah, like I said, it sells itself. It's just a product that people smile at, and they just want to have like a little piece of it. We've had a few people that actually have gotten every piece of Rickshaw item that we carry in the shop. I say we, but it's only me, me and my partner and my pups. Um, but yeah, no, it's super cool to see. I'm so glad that Rickshaw was able to work with me with this design. They have been wonderful, and I have a new design coming out. Hopefully, in the middle of May. It's already May, so in a few months, hopefully, yeah.
Do you think you're going to have the single pin like the necklace, or is it that something you don't want to announce what your new thing is going to be yet? Because that seemed to be really popular at Atlanta and at
Um,
Chicago. Now, granted, I didn't make either of those shows, but just seeing that the kind of neck lanyard with the
yeah,
single pin case, it seems to be growing in popularity.
I agree. And you know what? Even I bought one of those. I I have never had a single sleeve. It's only at pen shows when people ask me, like, do you have a single? And, now that you mentioned it, maybe I did just put in my order a few days ago for Rickshaw. So maybe I can be like, hey, can you just tack on a few? And I may bring some because, yeah, I want one for myself. I don't have a lanyard with my logo, with the mascot, but yeah, something to consider for sure.
Well, and if you think about your pin you got from Nick, a lot of the maker pins don't have clips. So if you
Yeah.
want to carry one around that you could easily have, at a show or something like that. Now, I don't think people are going to necessarily, have one of those single pins when they're going grocery shopping. Maybe they do, if more power to them if they want to. But, for going around pin shows, especially, or going to pin club or
Yeah.
meetups, it's an easy way where you're not setting it on the table where it's going to roll off or something
Yeah.
like that. You can easily get to it, show it off, put it back where you know where it is. If it's going to spill ink for some reason, it's going to spill inside that case and not on your shirt. It's just
Yeah.
a kind of a quirky little thing, but I've seen a lot more of those coming out. A lot of the makers are doing individual versions for that, and I'm sure Rickshaw loves it because it's everybody loves Rickshaw stuff. And
I
then to
agree.
see all those different logos, and it's kind of like a sports team. Everybody has their branded bags they're walking around with. And, oh, that's the well-appointed desk. That's the Ley Reyes. That's
Yeah.
the Amarillo. That's the White Bear. You never know what you're going to see when someone's walking into, you know, the pin show floor into your pin club.
Yeah, no, and you know what? Something I was thinking about, even as a joke, was having a lanyard with a 6 pen roll. That'd be kind of funny to just keep all of your pens right here at your neck.
That's where you just have to do 2 D rings on it, so you wear it kind of like a Flavor Flav style pin case with a 6 roll. Be a great
Uh,
April Fool's joke, if nothing else.
that would be awesome, actually.
So, in that vein, talking about pin shows, with you being Chicago based, I believe I saw on Instagram a while back that it was kind of an anniversary of sorts for you. Was the Chicago Pin Show kind of like your official business kickoff of sorts a few years ago? And now, you've been able to grow it to where it's at?
Yeah, it definitely was my very first show when I launched officially the brand, the shop. It was February 16th. And I was like, okay, I'm here. I'm like, I had a few sales already. And then like May was coming up, the Chicago Pen Show was coming up. I'm like, well, I should probably venture out and like ask for a table. Like it doesn't hurt. And like I'm local. I was thinking of actually like commuting every day on the train, but then I realized it's far enough that there is no easy commute there on public transportation. Uh, so anyway, they accepted me. I had a nice little table, and yeah, that was my very first time. I started February, and then in May I was like at a pen show selling, and it was my first time learning, how much stock was enough. I had ordered so much stuff, and took like 2 cards full of like boxes of stationery, of inks, and I did actually pretty well. People were excited to see my product, see the new inks. It was like you mentioned earlier, a lot of different things, right? Everybody has the same thing spread out in the ballroom, but I had some pretty unique items. So yeah, that was my very first time, and for the first 2 years, I was only doing the Chicago Pen Show. But then it comes to a point, from a business standpoint, where you're like, "Hey, I need to kind of grow. I need to venture outside of like where I have been comfortable, because I need to put my name in front of other people and, introduce Amarillo to new customers, new faces." And so last year was my first time going to St. Louis and then also Orlando, which was great. At first I was very stressed with like, how am I going to travel with like, merchandise, and what is my table going to look like? So I was kind of figuring that on the fly. So my St. Louis table looked a little sad for my own liking, but people were so nice to me anyway. But at Orlando, it looked a little bit better. But now I think I have perfected my table a little bit. And this year I will be returning. We just did Chicago Pen Show, and I will be returning to St. Louis. And then after St. Louis, I have San Francisco, and then a week and a half after, I have Orlando. So it's my first time venturing even more to other pen shows. So it's something exciting, and the fact that people keep supporting my shop just makes that more possible.
No, San Francisco, that's one of those shows I haven't been to, but everybody hears about San Francisco. So, how do you think a show of that scale is going to be different? You have your table set up, you kind of have a general idea what you want to do, but
Yeah.
how do you potentially scale up, or do you only scale up to a point because you have to fly across the country with your stuff?
Yeah.
Where you're not trying to, you want to scale up so there's plenty of stuff to sell, but you also don't want to, lose any kind of, profit or keeping things going by having to transport all that stuff across the country. So how do you
Right.
kind of figure that in, being a, small shop, you don't have
Mm-hmm.
staff, I
Yeah.
watched your YouTube video this morning actually about, Chicago, where you're like, I'm a one person show, so I'm eating protein bars at my table because I don't have someone to watch. So how do you factor those kind of things in as you go to a larger scale show?
Yeah, and the difference between Chicago and St. Louis is St. Louis Pen Show provides lunch to the vendors. And they also provide volunteers. So last year I took advantage of that, and like I took like maybe 10 or 15 minutes um just to like run to the room where they had lunch and go get some food and then run back downstairs. But yeah, for the San Francisco Pen Show, I'm a little stressed about it too. I try not to like get that to me. But something I have to start thinking is like, start accumulating enough stock for like San Francisco and Orlando are pretty much back to back. And I hadn't realized that until like a few months ago when I was doing my graphic of my schedule. And I was like, oh, shoot. They're like right next to each other. And like a lot of the things that I sell are handmade. So I need to really, take that into account when I'm reordering stuff. So slowly I'm doing that. But to that question about how much or how to manage that, the stock situation for the table is just going to be like, I think I'm going to send a few boxes out in advance, at least of inks and notebooks, because those are the heaviest items, um, and have the hotel like house them. I noticed in the Chicago Pen Show this year that the notebooks were some of the items that just went really quickly. So I think I'm gonna take a few more than what I took this time. And again, just with the inks as well, just push it a little bit more than what I'm comfortable traveling with. And if anything, I can just ship it back, or have the hotel ship it back. I may plan to even stay a little bit. Should I stay longer now that I'm thinking about that? It's just like, do I take another day just to pack and then, ensure that I ship back my stuff? Or do I just, I don't know, risk it and then just put it all in my bag? And, if they charge extra for the weight, then it is what it is, and it's on the business, right?
Yeah.
But I, I won't know until I travel this year. But I keep hearing, lots of things about like, it's a very popular show. Everybody keeps telling me that I will do really well there because it's different and there's a lot of foot traffic. So maybe if I take a lot, it may all go in a day or two, hopefully.
Well, and even so, because a question that I didn't have on there, but I just thought of as we're talking, are you have you approached or have you been approached about the Amarillo products, like your branded ones, in stores? Is there a
Mm,
stationery store in California who might say, "Hey, you know what? We like your inks. Why don't we put some of those here on consignment so that way you're not flying them back?" So, is that
mhm,
something where you're considering taking that next step of having some of your, maybe not your products you sell from Latin America, but the ones that are Amarillo specific
mhm.
in stores? Is that something in your future growth plan, or is that something you hadn't thought of yet?
It's definitely something that's in the future. Like it's something that's in the back of my mind. Like like what could be next, and the sky's the limit for now because it is right now my shop. Like it's just online, and I run it from my home office here. I have my stock behind me, so we can go wherever people want me to go. Honestly, but yeah, that's something I hadn't considered about. Hitting up a stationery store there and be like, hey, can we do something with this? That's something to consider. But I have like there was I think I had heard one comment of one shop, one store thinking about asking me about my inks. But right now I'm still at a spot where before I do kind of wholesale on that, I want to perfect the box just because not that it's not perfect, but I want to ensure that it's a little bit thicker for them because I don't want them to have issues when they send it out and then they come back to me and like, hey, we're having so. There are some things that even though I thought I did pretty well, I could still improve on, and I'm gonna come out with a different ink label for my next ink. So before I do that, I want to perfect those items, and then I can comfortably be like, yes, let's do that.
No, and speaking of your ink boxes, if you haven't seen the 4 new inks that Eric released, you can line the boxes up and it makes like a little where you see Mr. Amarillo walking along, and that's just cool. I love when packaging does that where you can turn them all and see that. I used to my right when I finished college, worked at a bookstore, and every so often you'd have a series where like they'd be on the shelf and they'd line up and it would be a cool design where it looks great by itself, but when you put them all together, it just has a that cool look of tied together packaging. Not everybody thinks about that anymore. It's getting less common as things are more mass produced. So props for that, because that's just a cool little design element that I'm sure people in this hobby appreciate more than some others. Just to see that, because if you're buying the 4 inks, of course you need all four, and then you can put the
Yes,
boxes next to each other up on the
right.
shelf. If you have your shelf of ink boxes like I do, because it's like the top shelf is boxes, the next shelf is bottles, you
Yeah,
know. So it's
yeah.
just a different way to display them.
Right. It's that little extra, right? Like as a business owner and as a stationery lover, I'm always thinking about like what are people going to expect? I how do I treat the boxes for my inks that come in? Like, do I, and honestly, sometimes I just discard them. Sometimes I put them back in the box, and, if they're rectangular or square, and I stack them. Uh, but I actually borrowed this idea from Monarca Inks, which is a line of inks that I carry in my shop. They have two, two lines of inks. One is based on the desert and one is on the Caribbean. So they have four inks and all four panels line up to make a panorama. And I borrowed that, but I used the character. And it's just that extra, added bonus of collecting the four inks. So it makes a cute little picture.
No, and also if you're thinking pin shows, that's the kind of thing that's going to get people to walk up to a table and go, "Oh, look!"
Yeah.
And then they're not going to leave with one; they're going to leave with four because they want the whole, the whole
That's
thing.
it. Yeah.
So, in terms of products that you carry, you say you focus on Latin American creators and you saw a lot of products from Mexico that were being underrepresented. How have you gone about seeking out those small makers and creators in Latin America
Hmm.
to showcase their products in your store? Cuz I know one of my local pen friends, Lisa Olive Octopus, she has the little ink sampler
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
I got this pen, from Nick. Actually, it was one a different maker had made, but recently, and I was like, I need some ink. And she's like, oh, and pulled out the little box, and we're like, which one of these does she have with her that matches this? So I was able to get a pretty matching ink in the tiny
Nice.
little, vial. So
Little bio.
products like that, how do you go, how did you discover those lines that you're now carrying and have become staple items for you?
Yeah, those definitely came about the podcast with my friend Jeffrey, and it was some of those brands that we interviewed, and I immediately fell in love with. I'm like, this is such great craftsmanship, ideas, and design, and why is that not more prevalent or more uh, here in the US. And so, but now that I follow those brands, I see who they're collaborating with, who they're following, who they're sharing, and I'm discovering other brands. I discovered a line of pencils, and I brought a bunch of them when I first started the shop, and they just have such cool stuff. And now I pay attention to the design fairs that they do in Mexico as well, because there's a lot of brands that just show during those times. And I've discovered like lines of furniture that, at some point, I think I mentioned on Brad's podcast that one day, if I ever have a physical store, I would love to have some of that furniture be there, kind of like showcasing. And if people want to buy it, we can do a special order type of thing. And, just be that kind of showroom for your house, your unique furniture and your unique stationery. So yeah, I'm discovering brands along the way, just paying attention to who they are collaborating with.
No, and that's a great way because that ties in. Someone said when I mentioned to them I was going to be interviewing you, they're like, "Oh, I love his Instagram because he showcases." And this is your personal one, not your Mario.
Hmm.
That's a little bit more business
Hmm.
focused, but you share all sorts of things, and that was a great way to find other people you needed to follow in the stationery world because people are following you because of your business, and therefore you're showcasing others. So it's kind of that paying it forward virtually in
Yeah.
a way where you're sharing these cool posts or you're saying something that, oh, people are, that's a cool thing. I want other
Yeah.
people to see that. And that was
Yes.
an interesting take of, because that is true. When someone gets into a hobby, you're going to find the couple of people who are known, and
Hmm.
then how do you find more people? You look at who
Right.
those people are following, and then
Exactly.
you kind of discover other things, like especially pen makers. There's so many makers out there now, and they all make such cool things, but they're all so different. You
Right.
know, you hear of the Jonathan Brooks or the Sean Newtons, the Mythic, but
Hmm.
then the little one of, like with Brad's interview series of Meet Your Makers, and
Yeah.
you know, at a much smaller scale, since I have makers local to me, I've been trying to do that as well because it gives a feature to someone who is unknown.
Hmm.
They might have a small following, but like the D Squared Arts that
Oh yes.
is in Little Rock, the hand carved. I
Yeah.
mean, seeing pins like this in person, it's a
Yeah.
whole different thing. Like in your hand, it's just a different world. So that's a neat way of, my little part. Like you said, yours is to bringing Latin America. I don't want to run a business, but I like, in the past, I hated being on camera. So what I do, I start a YouTube channel. Go figure. But it's just an interesting way to, talk to people and, help spread the word for others so they can
Hmm.
discover these cool products and things like that as well.
Yeah.
So, um, let's see. Let me look at what other questions I had here. We talked about your mascot.
Well,
Talked
and while you
about.
find the questions, I did want to like just bring up 2 points that you made. One about D Squared Arts. I just saw his pants at the Chicago Pen Show and instantly fell in love. Like, there's so much thought behind them, and that's what also makes his craft unique, right? And about the sharing is caring aspect of what how I share other people. I have gotten that comment from so many people that are like, oh my gosh, I have discovered so many cool accounts because of your stories, because you share them. And I'm like, yeah, like I love celebrating content and art and creativity. Look, why keep it hidden? If you see something cool, share it so other people can have access to that. And maybe it'll spark creativity within your own journaling or your own hobby or your pen usage. Maybe they're using pens and inks in a different way. Why not share that?
Well, and that's something I've mentioned in some of the videos I've done of asking people to leave comments of how are you using some of these things, because I find that interesting. We when you boil down stationery, you're using something that makes marks on a
Hmm.
paper.
Right.
but it can be done in such different ways. Like, I am not somebody who ever would have thought I would use stickers in a journal.
Hmm.
And then after the Arkansas Pen Show, my wife kind of met Danielle from Happiness Handmade, who does the stickers, and she started journaling. And then when I interviewed Danielle, I was like, okay, this is cool. And then I've had this trend that it's great and it's also terrible, because I've been interviewing people, and then afterwards I keep end up buying things from their stores because we've had a good conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so now I've purchased Happiness Handmade stickers 3 times, and it's about time to order some more because I'm actually using them.
Yes.
And it's little things like that, because I never would have thought of putting that in the journal because it's a lined journal.
Mm.
But once you kind of say screw it, there's no rules to this, do
There
whatever you
are no
want to,
rules. Yeah.
then it
It-
it
eh,
really opens up and expands on that
yeah.
possibility.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, you can set your own rules, but be open to changing a little bit. Maybe, and if it, just change one page, change something, and if you don't like it, you just turn the page and start a new one. And how many notebooks do we have? Let's talk about that.
well, how many notebooks do we have that we were afraid to put anything in that we've had
Yeah,
sitting on the
that's
shelf
another
for
question.
so long because it has to be perfect. You don't want to mess
Right.
up that cool, unique notebook.
Yeah.
And kind of once you get past that point, it really lets things become more natural.
Yeah.
You're not constraining of, what if other people see this? I don't think any people are ever going to see what I'm writing because it's for me. And
Hmm.
once you kind of get that mental state of, this is for me, I'm going to do whatever I want. And like you said, you don't like it, scratch it out, turn the
Yeah.
page, rip a page out. You have options.
Yeah.
So to go back to the products that you're carrying, I know you have your branded Amarillo stuff, and you talked about a new Rickshaw item.
Hmm.
Do you have any other collaborations in the works, like other pins? I know Nick made those, but that was kind of a one of. And I saw recently you got some of Mr. Amarillo engraved on nibs. So, are there
Hmm.
any other kind of collaborations, on the pin side or pencil side in the future that you're able to speak of yet, or that you'd like to get to at some point?
You are paying very close attention, Derek.
Got to do
Yeah.
research before doing this. You got to have good questions to ask.
Yeah, and the clues are there. It's just up to people to put two and two together. But yes, I do have. I think this time I do have another round of 10 pens coming out. I already have the pens, Derek. I have the pens. I have the nibs. I have everything. I just need to take pictures and just put them up the website. Which I don't know why I'm dragging my feet on it, but I need to do that. So I have 10 pens coming out. They're gonna look familiar, but they're a different maker. So there's that. Hint, hint. And then I'm working with somebody else to do now a pocket pen. So um, you'll see a familiar material, but it's with like one of my new favorite makers that I fell in love with his pocket pens. So, and I think you know what, just for your podcast, we'll share that it's Mayfair. So yeah, I'm gonna do some pocket pens with him, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And I
No,
have another pen in mind, but it's still not. It's still a concept. It's gonna probably take at least a few more months before that one comes out.
no, I would love to see a nib holder in your
Mm,
Amarillo colors, because you sell Kakamori
yeah,
nibs. So that'd be
yeah,
cool to have a nib holder, because we're all swatching so many inks these days, and there's those kind of staple nibs like the Colorverse Shuttle or the Kakamori or things like
yeah.
that. The nib holders, they're out there, but I don't want a plain wood one. I don't want an aluminum. I want something that's cool looking.
Something
It's
fun. Yeah.
with the because I've gotten better about more colorful inks and more colorful pens over time. When I
Yeah.
started, all the pens that were all black, those are the best. An all black pen with like oxblood ink, that was like
Yeah.
the
This is life.
pinnacle.
Yeah.
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 And now it's like, oh, well, that's a cool green with black in it. I should own one of those.
Mhm.
Or, oh, look at this bright green ink. The pen show ink that Vanessa made for Little Rock. It's like
Mhm.
the fresh as a daisy, and it's a lime green shader. And I'm like, this is great. So things like that. So that's one of those things that I've been on the hunt for a nib holder, and that's why I keep looking around to see. I know there's one out there that somebody has on one of these sites I haven't discovered yet, or something that's not mainstream. I want kind of the smaller maker. I'm in my
Yeah,
maker pen era,
yeah,
so I know
yeah,
I'm going to find one of those at some point. But that's great to hear you're going to have some other pens, because that's one thing with the maker community. They all know each other, they all like each other, and they all support each other. If
right.
you follow a lot of makers, half the time their posts are, "Hey, I just got this pen from this other
Yeah,
maker and I'm inked it up and I'm using it." And that's so
it's so
unique.
wonderful. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good thing to see for sure.
they're counterparts, not competitors.
Yeah.
Because consumers, oh, I need one of those. Well, I also need one of those. They're not. It's
Hmm.
not an either or. It might be either or until you
Hmm.
know your financial situation will change. But if it's cool, at some point you're probably going to end up with both. So pick your poison.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So in terms of your inks are really popular, are there any other products that you mentioned the furniture if you had a physical location, but for your store as of now, this is kind of tying into kind of the final questions. We kind of start to wrap up, but in not the full what's next, but kind of a second to last question, what kind of products do you feel like you still that are still underrepresented that you want to have in your store, even if you don't know the maker of who it is? Are there certain types of products that you'd like to carry that you just haven't found the right fit for your aesthetic and your store offerings yet? The book weights, like Good Made Better, I really love the book weight I have from them. Just unique things like that they have a purpose, and once you find it, they're great. But talk about that. What are those kind of missing items that you're on the hunt for to eventually carry for your store?
Yeah, actually, one of the very first ones that I was hunting for a lot was for a pocket notebook cover, because there were a lot of field notes lovers that would come up to my table and were like, "Do you have a cover for this?" And I didn't. But it wasn't until a few months ago that, like, one of my favorite brands that I carry, that all they do is leather work, they came out with a cover, and it comes in brown or black, and it's beautiful. But I think one of the main items that I'm really like looking for is a fountain pen friendly notebook, because like in Mexico, fountain pens is still like not as big as, and even in the US, like it's a very small community, right? And our fountain pen notebooks come from Asia, from for the most part. So I'm still looking for that perfect notebook, even though some of the ones that I have actually do take fountain pen ink pretty well, and I'm using two right now that do wonderful with it. I don't like to say they're fountain pen friendly, because I have had one or two that all of a sudden, they like the paper is just funky, and it's not feathering, but it's doing something that, for somebody who loves Tomoe River and that kind of quality, they would just not like it. So I don't say it is. I just show them the samples of the books that I have, and I'm like, here's how my notebook is behaving. I'm not specifically saying this, but take it and at your own risk. But if it isn't for fountain pen, maybe it's for pencil or ballpoint, which I'm using both on in my notebooks as well. So I think the notebooks is what's missing, like a really true fountain pen friendly notebook. And I actually, back to the self-branded stuff, the Amarillo Stationery branded items, I did want to come out with like notebooks. But when I thankfully I didn't, because of, again, the whole Tomoe River fiasco with the paper. And I would be like Hobonichi right now, with horrible paper. And as a small business, that stresses me out. Whenever, like, if I see that a shipment is just sitting in like the post office not moving, that stresses me out. I'm like, do I have to resend it or what? Like, at that point, I can't do anything about it, right? I'm not in there moving packages myself. So if at that level, a problem at that level would just be something that would break my little heart, honestly, and I just wouldn't be able to handle it. So for now, I'm holding off on notebooks until somebody figures out, like, what are we doing with paper.
Yeah, well, and even the term, I mean, if we think about in the larger scheme of paper, fountain pen friendly is so subjective
Mm-hmm.
because I write with extra fine nibs. The smaller the
Mm.
nib, the better. You go on half the papers and put a broad nib on there, or you do an ink swatch, it's
It's
a whole
gone.
different world. So fountain pen
Yeah.
friendly, to my definition, is not going to line up with other
Mm-hmm.
people.
Yeah,
And
true.
then, I've recently started to add in more roller balls and ball points and things like that, which I think that's kind of a trend in some ways, where we all jump into fountain pens so heavily and then realize fountain pens are wonderful, but they're
Yes,
not always the right tool for the job. And you
correct.
kind of have to backtrack. And now, like, I picked up one of the spoke pins the other day. I have a Retro 51 sitting in front of me. And my latest thing is the multi pins, like
Oh
with the
yeah,
uni.
same. Yeah,
They're just, they're so nice, and writing on bad paper, yeah, they have their place. And that's the kind of, part of the discovery and part of the fun,
yeah,
finding which of those items, like we were talking about a little bit earlier in the interview, at pin shows, you said notebooks really sold for you in Chicago. I know at Little Rock, the couple of people who had paper, they were selling paper and covers like hotcakes because that was different. So it's
hmm,
that, differentiating from, swimming upstream and being different, having a different product offering, and that, or something that just stands out, like your logo, your rickshaws, something that makes it visually appealing enough for someone to walk over and start the conversation, and then the
yeah,
products will speak for themselves. Or, even if the product is someone's half told, someone talking, spending time talking to you at a table, I'm sure you're going to be like talking to them, not pushing, and they're going to go, you know what, that was a great conversation, I'm going to take a bottle of ink, even if they hadn't planned on it.
yeah.
It's that
And
kind of,
actually
once you
saw
establish
that.
those connections.
Yeah, I saw that happen to me at the Chicago Pen Show just this like a few weekends ago. I was talking to a few people and like the same ones that probably thought I was from Texas, but they were like a few sets of people that would come up like, hey, tell me more about this table. It looks interesting. The logo is cute because it really stands out. And I just told them like my story. I'm like, hey, this is like the purpose of Amarillo is just to showcase all of these brands. And after they left, they came back like a few hours later, like, okay, we're back. And, like, again, you just have beautiful items. We love your story. And now they're looking for something to buy when, like, they didn't even, like, I was never on the radar.
No, and that's cool. So for the final question that I alluded to, what's next for Amarillo Stationery?
Yeah. And, I was thinking of this earlier and I kind of already said it, but the sky's the limit with like where I go next because I'm still very small, but I think I want to come out with more inks. I want to perfect my little packaging just to, make it a little thicker. I'm going to update my label. And I think also what's next is more proprietary stuff. Um, because I think that's where I have a better handle on my margin, like for all of the business people watching, with other products, like I'm at the mercy of, their discounts to me. And then, whenever I do sales, with discount codes, let's be honest, I'm not making as much money, right? But then I'm also like offering my products to people that are looking forward to that little discount. And I have heard before, like, hey, 10% is not enough. But I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is what I can do right now, please value that because it does, there is a lot of effort and, um, I don't know, like risk in a sense, like going on here. But I think the proprietary stuff is what's next for me. Like more merchandise. Like even this year I came out with these little hats and beanies, and that has helped a lot as well because like you said earlier, they just spread in the word for me, But they also have a super cool product to go with and just yeah.
No, that's great. Stickers are always a good one because I was looking at that too. Now that I'm starting to put stickers in journals, I'm going to have to order an Amarillo one to put in there to, write down, hey, I did this interview and stuff. So there's always things like that that shows the brand. It has the familiarity and whatnot. And, even like your patches, they're just cool designs and they're going to
Yeah.
stand out, and you know, they could go on a jacket, they could be ironed on a thing. So it's very cool. So, Eric, once again, thanks for taking some time to kind of talk through this. I think this was a great conversation. We covered everything we had planned and more. And, I look forward to seeing your new pen releases when they come out, and new inks, and just how Amarillo will grow in the future, because everybody's going to see those rickshaw bags walking around and they're going to know, oh, what's new there? Because they're going to want to come see what the new thing is. So thanks, once again. And if you're new to listening, I'm trying to release one of these every week. If you have suggestions of other people you'd like to hear me talk to, leave a comment on the YouTube video. If you're listening to the audio version on the Spotify or Apple, or, I have my website, DWRD.net, where there's going to be a post related to these as well. Leave comments, because this was a great conversation. It was a quasi suggestion. And, there's a lot, like Erick's having to find new products. I'm wanting to find new people that I've never met. Erick and I never spoke until today. And this was
Yeah.
a great conversation. Like, we'd known each other for a long time. And,
Yeah.
I like that. That's a nice benefit for me here. So,
Thank you
Erick,
so much,
once again,
Derek.
thank you. This was a pleasure.
Likewise.
And, we will catch you on the next episode.
Sounds great. See
Bye.
you around.